Well, welcome back. We're studying the wedding at Cana. And Dr. Pauline, I want to ask you a question then. So what or why did Jesus go to the wedding?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the two villages are fairly close together. So evidently this is part of a relationship stream that Jesus would have known growing up in that area. It's right near Nazareth. But there's a tradition in the 3rd century, and a tradition doesn't make it right or wrong. But it's interesting that people were thinking this way a couple hundred years after this story was written. And the idea is that John was actually the son of Mary's sister, Salome, which would make John and Jesus first cousins, and that this was John's wedding. And if that's true, it just adds a delightful little side trick to the story. And it tells us, if that's the case, Jesus was invited to the wedding, but he brings along all these other guys. Mm-hmm. You know, and they're eating and drinking too. And maybe they were uninvited guests, you see, because Jesus didn't even know some of them personally until a couple days before. So he brings his companions to the wedding, and that may be why Mary says to him, it's kind of like, it's your fault that we ran out, so do something about it.
So you're saying that...
Putting a little heat on Jesus here.
All right. So you're saying that the author of the Gospel of John, that's his wedding? That
is what the tradition suggests. And in ancient times, we can only note that people thought that way, and if it's true, it adds a nice little touch to the story.
That's interesting, but again, that's a tradition then.
Yeah, no, we don't know that to be the case,
right.
But it's not, there's nothing in the story here that says that's not so.
Okay, well, let's talk about the wine now, because some people are thinking, here Jesus performs a miracle and he turns water into an alcoholic beverage. Tell us about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, a lot of commentators will come to this and say this had to be alcoholic, okay? And first of all, the word wine is there. And second of all, there's this issue of preservation. They often preserved drinks through the use of alcohol. And not only that, you know, the whole idea of people, you know, after drinking a while, you bring out the inferior stuff because they don't notice anymore. So all those details, a lot of commentators would say it was alcoholic. I would point out several things, however. First of all, the word wine in Greek does not require it to be alcoholic. Also, the same word is used for grape juice. So the text does not push you in the other direction. The text is open. Second of all, they had ways of preserving back then. Concentrating the grape juice, putting a little olive oil across the top after all the air is out of it. It can last for years. So you could bring out grape juice any time of year, but it's reconstituted grape juice. And the whole idea, the surprise of the caterer, could that happen without alcohol? I think it could, because you could get fresh stuff from Egypt anytime, but it would be really expensive. And people just wouldn't do that unless they were doing something special. So if Jesus produces fresh grape juice at a time of year when it's not available normally, that would be a big shock as well. So the point is, the story doesn't compel it to be wine. And I think those of us who have seen the destruction that alcohol brings, you know, this text doesn't compel us otherwise, is what I'm saying.
And I can't imagine Jesus bringing, you know, the alcoholic beverages into, you know, this party. Right? Now, you told, earlier you said that you would tell us, you made a promise. What is the spiritual meaning of this story in the Gospel of John?
Well, in verse 11, which I think we actually didn't read, so maybe let me read it now. It says, "This, the first of his miraculous signs, Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and the disciples put their faith in him." So it calls this a sign, and in the Old Testament, signs were the marks of a true prophet. When Moses came to Egypt, he threw down his rod and it became a snake. That was a sign that God had called him to a special task. When Saul was anointed by the Spirit, he began speaking prophetically. He began preaching, you see. And so Saul does some unusual things to tell people, yeah, he's been anointed by the Lord. Something special has happened here. So repeatedly in the Old Testament, you have this concept of signs indicating somebody special has come. So this is the first sign. This is the first indication people had, aside from John's testimony in the first chapter. It's the first indication that Jesus is more than just a man, that he's a prophet and maybe even more than a prophet. So this story becomes more than just a story. And you'll notice it says the third day. Now, there's been a series of days in chapter 1. On this day, something happened, then on next day. Now the third day, scholars have noticed that counts 7 days. Now, what's the most famous 7-day period in history?
A week?
It would be the week, creation. So it goes back to creation. And what is the 7th day in creation?
It's the Sabbath?
It's the Sabbath. And what marks the entry of the Sabbath at creation? A wedding.
A wedding. Okay.
Adam and Eve.
Wow.
You see? So when you see these little hints in the story, you have a wedding on the 7th day, and there's other language here that reminds of creation. For example, you have the 7th day, you have a woman, you have a wedding, and you have a creative word. God said, and it was done. Here Jesus speaks, and the water becomes wine. So you have all these indications that creation is in the back of the mind. Jesus was a second Adam, and the church becomes a new Eve, according to Paul. So that lies behind the story. What power did Adam have? He had the power to affect the fish of the sea, the beasts of the earth. He had dominion over all these things. What does he do later on? He has a miraculous gift of fish. When nobody can find any fish, Jesus brings fish into the net. That's the power of Adam, as Adam was intended to be. He had dominion over the earth. He had dominion over the storm. So a deeper side to this story is Jesus as the second Adam and a new creation. He brings a new creation to this earth. He's going to overturn all the pain and the trials and the suffering of the old creation. And now comes this new creation. Another piece of this story is that turning water to wine reminds of the story of Moses, when he turned water into blood. It also reminds of Elisha, who took the stale waters of Jericho and made them fresh. You see? So in this connection, it's calling us to remember the Exodus as well, when water was turned into blood, and maybe also the stories of Elisha and Elijah are all brought in behind here. So how would this work? In the story here, you have the water of purification, the Jewish waters of purification. They washed their hands over everything. They were very concerned about ritual religion. And ritual religion can point us to something greater, but it often becomes just a ritual. And so the author here is saying behind the rituals has got to be something greater, and Jesus is that greater thing. Jesus is the wine. And what does the wine or grape juice of the Lord's Supper represent? Jesus' blood. So you have a number of hints here also of the crucifixion. Mention of the third day. Turning the water into wine, which represents his blood. In verse 4, it talks about, my time has not yet come. The Greek word there is the hour. Jesus repeatedly says in the Gospel of John, my hour has not yet come. My hour has not yet come. And then in chapter 12, he says, the hour has come when the Son of Man must give up his life. So the hour of Jesus is the time of the cross. In verse 11, it also says he revealed his glory. And in the Gospel of John, glory is always a reference to the cross. You see what's happening here? These are seeds being planted that sprout later in the Gospel, a deep spiritual meaning. One more. Mary appears only twice in this Gospel. In the wedding of Cana, and where else do you think?
At the cross?
At the cross. John is the place where Mary comes with the beloved disciple. And Jesus says, woman, behold your son, son, behold your mother. Jesus hands his mother over to the keeping of John after his death. So Mary appears only twice, in the wedding here and at the cross. So you have what I call cross connections. that point to a deeper meaning of the story. And as I said, we could spend hours
Well,
on
I'm
this.
sure we could. Now, this is very deep theological study that you've done here, and maybe for a layperson who is just reading the Bible, perhaps does not have the time or the tools as a scholar to go through all of these, these studies. Let me ask you a question. How should one, when reading a passage like this one, read the passage and apply it to his or her personal life?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I think the personal application is definitely this. These stories of Jesus can remain in the distance. Mm-hmm. They are out there, okay? And we can read them and go on with our lives. But to ask ourselves the question, what difference does Jesus make? Why do I need to receive Jesus for something special to happen in my life? Who really cares? And one answer to that question, which is also related to this whole idea of second Adam and humanity and so on, how do human beings discover value? We go about it a number of different ways. We try to accumulate things. I'm a valuable person if I dress real cool, or if I have really great cars, or a fantastic house, or big money in the bank account. The trouble is, if you try to find value in that way, you can lose it all. The stock market can crash, your house can burn down, the car can crash. To trust in money and in things for a sense of value just doesn't cut it. A second way we look for value is in achievements. I'm going to get a PhD, then I'll be somebody. I'm going to be president of the United States, then I'll be somebody. I'll be a great quarterback, and then I'll be somebody, you see. But when you look for achievements, well, teachers get senile, athletes get old and decrepit, presidents have to retire, you see. And so that doesn't last either. And then we look for value in others. The only way to truly get value is to have a friend who knows all about you, who loves you just the way you are, who lives forever and has genuine value. And there's only one person, that's Jesus. There's no other source of meaning and value in life that's truly permanent than Jesus Christ. And that is why Jesus has lasted 2,000 years. That's why there's still millions and millions of people that trust in him, because there's really no other path to life. All other paths are temporary. And that, I think, is at the core of what the gospel is all about. And at the core of what John is pointing us, Jesus is what truly matters. Everything else is just subtext. You're at this wedding, but it ends up being all about Jesus, about his death, about him as the second Adam, and all the rest of that, Messiah.
And again, it was important for this couple to invite Jesus to their wedding. And I hope, friends, that you invite Jesus, not necessarily to your wedding only, but in every area of your life. Till next time.